Let's go.
Alrighty.
All right, so because this is an actual work group meeting, I will read the antitrust policy. RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace and will not be a forum for anti-competitive conduct. The RESO antitrust policy governs the activities of RESO and its members, including this meeting. A link to the policy was emailed to you with the meeting agenda. Please consult RESO's counsel if you have any questions about the policy. All right. So before we get driving into it, just go back one there. How many people, since we're kind of dead at this time of day, how many people is this your first RESO meeting? Show of hands. That's great.
Liar.
Thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate that. Next question, since we got those folks going. How many people think their job is mostly writing software? Show of hands. Okay. You guys are in the right place. How many people spend their days working with the data? There we go. That's a good crowd. You're in the right place. What was the other one I had? How many people manage people who write software or work with data? There we go. Now we're almost getting everybody. Last one. How many out there pay for all of this? The people who work with the data, the people who write the software day in and day out. There we go. Some folks at the back. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask for one more piece of exercise here. If you attended a Transport Workgroup, Certification Workgroup, or other work group under Transport in the last 6 months, would you please stand up and let the people in the room see you? There you go. I personally want to thank you guys for doing the work, because if it wasn't for you guys, none of this would have happened. So that's really great. Thanks for being here. And what else do I have here? I think that's good enough. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the streaming participants. If you're streaming and you attended those meetings, give yourself a pat on the back, because you did a great job. So thank you. Let's move on then, move along quickly, because we've got a lot of ground to cover. That's me, Paul Stuziak. You've probably seen this before. We'll move quickly through these if you don't mind. That's Josh. You've heard him many times today. Next is Sergio. We have some other leadership. Rick Herrera's over, I just saw him somewhere way at the back of the room there. Dan, oh, I left that in, sorry. Dan's starting up the certification analytics subgroup. He didn't give me a headshot to start with, so I used Neo from his meme that he was using. Move along, please, move along. He actually has a headshot somewhere. Eric Finley's not at the meeting, but he participates on the as a co-chair or vice chair of the certification subgroup. And now we'll get into the agenda, which is where I think we really want to be. Usually we lead off after the agenda with sort of what the transport group does. I saw a number of hands here as first-time attendees. We cut those out for this. If you have questions about it, please come and talk to one of us. We'll be happy to give you lots of background, help you understand how this all works and goes together. But we've been busy, very busy over the past 6 months. These are the highlights. We'll go into details on each of these. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read them out to you because there's, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. The last 4 slides are actually quite interesting, and that's my hook. I'm going to put it in the water now. We'll see who I can hold with it. And then we've got some new business that we want to bring up, which are those last slides. So I think they're actually worth waiting for. We'll try to get to them quickly. So we've done a lot in re-engineering and rebuilding how we've been doing things. There's a new transport website, transport.reso.org, following along with the many patterns you've seen earlier today. We've done more work around specification and testing rules. We've come up with a new method for entering RCPs, and they start as issues. All of you writing software, you've got software issue management, probably Jira. That's what we're using. So very familiar to all of us out there who do this as a living. And then the actual document itself is now a GitHub repository, and you do pull requests to change it. This seems to be a much more streamlined and efficient way than we were doing with Confluence, which we struggled with to keep up to date, keep it in alignment. It's really actually been really good. And if you go to transport.reso.org, you can start diving into it, jump into the GitHub repository if you want to, and actually see what we've been doing with the standard itself.
The main goal here is really to make the standard public, make this process public and available to everybody. We have a lot of people who have developers working on this who cannot access Confluence for whatever reason. And we just want this process to be public so that everybody has a chance to participate. So that's the main reason for the move.
We've also started using GitHub discussions. We did use Confluence discussions for many years, and they did not work very well for us. We're hoping that we can get this to work better inside of GitHub. It is a tool that most developers have at least passing knowledge of, and they've at least experimented with it, so it is a familiar place to be working in. And in that website, sorry, Josh, getting the last one, we didn't get rid of all the stuff that was out there before. It's just been linked back. So if you want to go back and try to find it, it'll take you back to Confluence. If you find missing links, and I think Jeff already found one, we're going to fix them. So please bring them to our attention. We'll get those fixed. All right. We had lots of fun with Lookup Resource. But the good news is it's all wrapped up. We had, 4 or 5, felt like 1,000 meetings.
6 or 7.
6 or 7. It was a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of interest in this because it's a way to represent, obviously, the things that we look up, the enumerations. And there were differing opinions. We also have to factor in the fact that our underlying transport is OData, and it has certain elements like top and skip that have meaning and impact. And so we had vigorous discussion, I would say, around lookup, but we came to consensus, which is how this is supposed to work. So we've brought that forward. We're going to be incorporating that into 2.1. And
it's actually already Data Dictionary 1.7, and we have one provider going through certification right now. The main thing about the lookup resources, we're just trying to make enumerations easier to deal with. It's really difficult to advertise those in OData right now. Now we've made them a lot easier, and that's much more appealing to the data consumers.
Yeah, and that was a size thing, right? It was too big to put in the metadata, but just to clarify, we're still supporting enumerations at this time and probably for quite a while.
Yeah, but anybody who's interested in this could actually, reach out and get certified on it now, and we are wrapping up the testing tools for it. So please reach out if you're interested.
All right, onward and upward. Hopefully everybody went to the session first thing this morning on certification analytics. It's actually a really cool tool, and if you didn't look, you need to go look. You need to tell your people back in the office to go look. It's really important. It's going to make a difference. It really was nailed home to me when we did the roundtable. We started well before our time, and we started very quickly with 20 people. There were already 20 people in the room interested about this because it exposes data they just can't get to right now before they build their system. By the time we finished, the room was full. And that shows the most interest I've seen, and it was really gratifying to see that because we now have people who can see how they can help their business move forward with tooling that we built inside of RESO. And Josh deserves the lion's share of support or consideration for that because he did almost all the heavy lifting on developing it and building it. So, and Sam too. Sam, I think, left.
But Sam paved the way and helped.
Sorry?
Sam paved the way and helped a lot.
Yes, I was just going to mention that, but he's not where he was. Yeah. All right, let's move on. But seriously, get involved in looking at certification analytics because it's very exciting. We're going to, and we've been drumming this message home again and again, start turning the screws down on being more strict about certification. I think we've just got to the point where the screws are starting to bite. So please be paying attention to things like our updated testing rules where we're going to be more strict on enumerations. So
I can actually speak to this a little bit with some stats too. So the current standardization rate for RESO fields, which we've been paying a lot of attention to for the last 2 years, is 90%, which is really good. It was like 45% before. So we've doubled the standardization rate for fields. For enumerations, it's currently about 15% from the analytics tools. So that is not good. There are a lot more enumerations than there are fields. So if there's 4 times or 10 times as many enumerations, 4 times or 10 times as much mapping, right? We're trying to solve that problem. So we are going to get very strict on enumerations. If you have variations or local things that look like standard things, you will not pass testing anymore.
Yes. That doesn't mean you can't keep the local thing, but you have to have it in the standard names as well. So you can keep supporting your legacy customers, but you got to start putting stuff where it belongs long term.
And then we actually have sorry?
I was going to bring up, open question is still, how are we going to measure success on this? What is a reasonable number of standard names for enumerations across the industry? So we're looking for input on that.
What I was going to say is we already caught some interesting cases. This country road versus county road. There's already country road in the dictionary, but when we run this matching, we flag county road as a fail because it looks like country road. But county road is actually a legitimate thing, right? So we have a new process that came about from this, where we can start to elevate those things into standard fields if we find them. And so that I think will be very useful for the standard.
All right. We had another vigorous discussion, I would say, around the field resource. So this is a way to expose all of the fields in one place so it's easy to find the information you're looking for. It got adopted. We backported it into the current data dictionary. It has work we still need to do on this. I didn't change that. Oh, well. All the kinds of things that go around how you actually use the field need to be expressed in a way to say, I can display it, I can search on it, I can do all these other things. I can't display it on this kind of page. I can display it here. And this really came up, and I think this is the right place to talk about expansion and the expand first. There's more later. And then where do those fields belong and to which systems do they belong?
And also lookups, which lookup
Yes,
fields
thank you.
would they be belonging to?
Oh, I did miss that one. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, really at a high level, we could do this in OData, but OData metadata could be monolithic and difficult to parse. It's not very friendly in that regard. And what we're trying to do is make this more like the dictionary. If we have a field resource to advertise these things beyond like the data type, we still need that in OData. But for all these extra things, we can start using this and extending it in a way that's useful for people. And we had something similar like this in REDS before, and it worked extremely well. So this should also, in theory, be backwards compatible with what's in REDS to help people move forward to the Web API.
Okay. So the next 6 months or so, that was a lot of work to cover, and we actually did really well in getting that all done. We've got some more work to do over the next 6 months or so, and one of the things that have come up is how do we advertise to people about the things that are important locally, the local extensions. Real estate is local. There's no getting around it. We can share a bunch of fields, but it's still going to be important how far I am from the lake, the beach, the ski slope, whatever your local condition is that's really important to your market. But we need a better way to express this. Right now, we have 2 different ways of doing it. If you're a consumer of this data, particularly if you're trying to do it live, that's a problem. And we want to drive standards, which means bringing us down to thinking about one way to solve this problem. So you see the goal. We want to be able to predict where do I find the local fields and what is the difference between standard field and local field in a meaningful way. That's a discussion that we need to have. And if there are people who'd like to discuss it, we could do some here. But we will definitely be doing it in both certification and transport over the next 6 months.
Maybe we could get some preference. So the choice is really commingle local fields, meaning that if you had property resource and you wanted to add a new field to the property resource, the dictionary allows you to do that anytime. Nothing wrong with that. Passes certification just fine. So that's one way you could have local fields. Just put them in the existing resources. But that has certain challenges, and you deal with multiple markets, so some people expand them in. So is there, maybe we can get a show of hands, is there any preference to, would you like to see the fields commingled? Maybe we can get a show of hands for
Sam.
Sam.
I don't think you get a vote, Sam.
Or would you like the local fields expanded in? Maybe we can get a show of hands there. I think it's about tied. Well, that's amusing because that's exactly how it is in the market right now. It's about 50-50.
Yeah.
So the problem is that Paul said 2 ways. It's actually more like 20 because how people expand them in and what field they call that when they expand it in, they're different. So if we have to have 2 ways, then commingling is easy. We need a standard way to expand them in. We can support both.
But we should only support one.
That's the goal. Anybody have questions or do you want to come up to the mic and speak to this?
And there's definitely others advocating supporting too, just to be clear.
Yes.
So we do have to decide how to do that, and I
We're
think
having
one
a
is better.
Looking for a spirited discussion.
Okay.
I think people are shy today.
I think we're at the end of the day and we're between people in a bar, but I want to get to the really important stuff that we have at the end that's new. So, okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
All right, as I mentioned before, we talked a little bit about expand in the work we did last semester, I guess I could call it. In this next 6 months, we really need to nail down expand. With our certification tool, we built it in a certain way that certain vendors who followed the OData standard correctly were expanding in resources that we had assumed were always at the top level. Media is the great example here. It's completely legitimate to be able to take the property resource and never have a media resource at the top level. The only way you get the media is through this $expand symbol that allows you to then project it into the property or trace it back. And so they were getting dinged because none of their media resources showed up. So we need to identify how we can incorporate this into and how we actually show success around this. I think that in the past year, probably year and a half, we've had a lot more focus both from the board and from the management of RESO to actually start forming up some metrics about what does success look like? What is it that we were trying to do? Did we achieve that? Like a real business. And so we're going to try and nail that down in the next 6 months, get that all done, and have it incorporated in the 2.1 standard, if not backported into something before. We did make some changes to certification testing tool to reduce the impact, the negative impact on those vendors who are doing it correctly, but just not being tested on it. All right. Oh, I love it when it does that. The next thing we need to get doing is completing our work on Web API 2.1, and this is also part of the new discussion coming later. We have some additional features inside of OData that we need to actually start enforcing, including, and most specifically, NextLink. We already have vendors who are supporting expand. We need to expand to more vendors.
Expand.
Yeah, I like dad jokes better, honestly. And then continue writing the tests around it. We didn't really do a complete coverage on the string tests.
We don't have any coverage right now.
We got to, yeah,
No
it's a
coverage.
string.
There's none.
So the test is it a string or is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is not really a very good test, but there are quite a few different types of tests that can be written. I'm going to let you take this one because it says discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I actually just want to go back to NextLink for a second. So where might that be useful? Well, right now, there's no real good set of like standard queries that you could use to initialize a data feed and to keep up with it. People are using all sorts of queries across the board. Some of them have better performance than others, depending on the system. And they can be very difficult because it's all client-driven paging. So the consumer actually has to do backflips and somersaults to try to even get the data. We want to provide a simple, reliable way to get the data in a large data set. And so this would basically mean, give me everything from property. There's no criteria on it if you don't want it to be, to initialize a feed. And then each page of records that comes back gives you a link to get the next page. So the consumer doesn't have to do anything except for read the link and follow it. That should be very easy for people to do. And it should be better for server vendors too, because it can optimize that behind the scenes. Right now it's a little bit, it's hard for them to support these kind of ad hoc queries. So,
and yet they make us do that when we connect to them for the first time.
Mhm.
Hey, we need to load all your data. Well, you can get it 2,000 records at a time. That's never going to happen when they've got 2 million records.
or 250 billion records, like in Sergio's
Yeah.
case.
Yes.
Yeah, and expand is just something we have to add. We didn't overlook it for core, but we talked about it back then. It wasn't felt to be critical in core. It was going to be an optional endorsement.
Yeah.
But there's enough people using it, enough interest from data consumers that we really need to do this. So it's a high priority for us.
And just to be clear, in the slides that you're seeing here, there are actually embedded links, and when this gets published, you'll be able to follow the links to the GitHub issue around this.
Yeah, there's a fairly well-written issue, I think, hopefully. But
Yeah.
these string query tests, since we're talking about lookup and field resources, we have to query those resources by string, so we need that. And then the lightweight APIs is interesting because we require a bunch of different data types for our core test right now. But depending on your use case, you might not have all those data types in your data set. Like, does a media, does that have a decimal value in it? Well, right now, most of them don't. And that would actually fail if you try to run your tests on that. But there's a legitimate case for people to run a standalone media server. So they should be able to get certified as well. So that's really what that lightweight API is about.
Doesn't this also harken back to RCP 22, 25, and 26?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the case where certain vendors provide services that could be considered fractional parts of a complete record. So, for example, floor plans. What was his other use case?
Tours.
Tours was another case where these vendors are providing you a complete data package that would be embedded into a full listing. And so there's no way that they could actually be tested and certified to say that you are actually behaving correctly in the existing specification and testing rules. So we would like to make that possible because there's all kinds of opportunities for people to add on ancillary services. Photographs, that was the other one. You hire a photographer to go out and take professional photos of the property. They then have to get that photo into the MLS. Well, you may not actually have the record fully in there. It needs to go back to the agent, who then needs to incorporate it in the rest of the record and submit the minimum record with usually at least one photo in most places. So having a way for them to be able to pump their data into a system doesn't exist right now. It's all,
And there's been some other simpler cases too, like if you're publishing even property, you might not actually have a decimal field in all the fields that you're outputting, and you will fail a test right now if you don't. So we've got to do something to fix that too.
But the MLSs will still be required to pass the core test. So this is actually an easy win for us because it doesn't take much work for us to support this. We just have to have basically a strict mode flag that says, okay, if it's MLS, run it in strict mode. If it's not an MLS, we're just going to recognize what's there, but we won't fail you for what's not. So I think Michael might have had a question. He was walking up to the mic.
oh,
Trying to understand on the expand stuff, especially with media, why is that taking so long?
So
and am I understanding right that you're not even going to deal with that till the fall now? So
we haven't decided the timeline yet. I think it's personally important. Why is it taking so long is a good question. We really wanted to vet it with the groups before we brought it into the core specification. So we took it, that was finished last month. So we could start working on it now if we wanted to. We have kind of priority, actually, this is a good question back to the group. So we have a lot of things in the pipeline right now. We've got supporting expand and some of these other things. That includes a payload specification because we have to be able to test people with the certification tools. But we also have Data Dictionary 2.0 in the pipeline. So it's really, do we start working on this first or do we start working on 2.0 first? I think there's a good reason, a lot of good reasons to start working on this first and then dictionary. But that's something I would ask the group.
Yeah, I mean, just so people understand, like in our case with FBS, and I know there are other vendors in the exact same boat. Like all the beautiful testing data and metrics you guys were showing earlier, it's basically useless for us at this point because every one of our customers is going to show no media. I mean, it's just like, why do we want to publish any of that information? So I feel like I'm not understanding why it's taking so long. It doesn't seem like it needs to take so long. And it is going to hold up other things that you already have out. And it just makes, I think, for sure it makes us as a vendor look terrible, which I take great exception to. And I think it makes the industry kind of look bad. Like we're publishing a bunch of reports trying to say how valuable those metrics are. And we're not going to have any of our 160 MLSs represented on that in an accurate way. So I just really, really think, you know, anybody who can support us in this, like push to make this get done. It shouldn't take more than a meeting, one more meeting. You've had like 5, 6 meetings on that topic.
Yeah.
It
Bottom
should
line,
get done.
it has been very controversial even in the work groups, right? Whether we want to, whether we even wanted to go there. So it has actually been quite difficult to get there just from that perspective.
Okay, but hold on 1 second. We do have consensus now that we're supporting expand. Yes, we will get to it. We're going to prioritize what we think is the right list. We'll bring it back to the board. The board can help us understand. You have a voice there, so you know.
As to why it's taking
I understand your frustration and concern, but it was very contentious when it came in, and it might have been the messaging. It might have been misinterpretation, but it definitely tied us up for a few meetings. And I understand your concern, and we'll make something happen about it. All right. Anybody else? Open shots. Sorry? The original contention was, first, did we actually need to support it? Sorry, the question was, why was there contention around this? The original question came back, and we didn't know that we didn't think we needed to support it at the time, so we didn't write tools for it. So there were no tools around it. We already had people running through the process, and to stop the whole process to go deal with the fact that what we'd made an assumption on was not correct. FBS went ahead and implemented it in the correct OData way. It's not wrong. We're just not testing it, and we're not scoring it. And that doesn't look very good on these reports because it looks like there's no data, but there is data. It's just expanded data. And then the question was, well, okay, tell us how you can actually build that and not have a media resource, because the original specification actually says you have to have one of 5 resources. So then we went back and talked about that for a bit. So it was, yeah, it was a little bit more challenging than I thought it was, and kind of popped out.
Yeah.
If
And
I
it
can
was also
maybe-
an
I can speak to it for a
endorsement
second.
as
So
well.
historically, for basically the last 10 years, media has been required at the top level. So we had to go to the work groups, make sure that that wasn't going to be a problem, that we don't do that anymore for anybody, and then support a new testing rule on top of that, which then we had to get feedback for as well, because if only maybe 1 or 2 voices wanted that, that would make it a lower priority, right? But big data consumers want it, and we had to get that buy-in and feedback from a product level, and now it's a priority.
So is this mutually exclusive from the conversation around requiring media as a top-level resource?
Yes, it is not, it's not mutually exclusive. It means that we've clarified the language that no longer has media in that set of, it's got to be one of these, right. I think they're down to 3 now, aren't we?
The way it works is that
One of.
we'll look and see if you have it as an expansion. If you do, we'll try to pull data that way and recognize it. If you don't, we'll look for it at the top level. If you don't find it at the top level, you will fail at that point.
Thank you.
Yep. It took a little while to figure that out, though. So,
Yes.
And it won't take long to write, the tools. It just comes to priority.
Not trying to harp on this
Go
at all,
ahead,
but in Michael's case, FBS and Grid both, keep rooms, units, and media only expanded.
Right.
I know you don't see it. I know it doesn't make our, certification look, like it's complete or full. Any chance of doing something? I know it's not sexy, but can we just add a little asterisk and maybe just a sentence or 2 that explains what that really means?
So
Does-
that's
I
a
mean,
good.
and it's a 5-minute process, I know, and it's not
No, it's a
sexy,
good
but-
question. If that would satisfy the current demand and open up the testing tools, we will do it.
Well, I just know from some of my MLSs, you know, they're proud of what happened, but they're also like, but if I go and I agree to let you publish this, then we look like we're failing. So,
More directly to your comment, we did actually have that open debate about, okay, there's media, there's also rooms.
Yeah.
There's also units, there's also, and
Open
then we
house,
went
there's,
down the rabbit hole a bit. I
power
will admit
production,
that.
green verification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did, I believe we actually got there. The last meeting was we should just change the report slightly to say 0 doesn't mean
0 doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just
Right.
means I'm not recording it.
yes.
Let me follow up on this a little bit though, because you know, it's one thing to put up some text on the certification system to show that might be expanded, and that's much less work than it is for me to write the testing tools and recognize expand. So if that first option is acceptable, you know, we can talk about how that text might look or how that might appear, and we can iterate that very quickly. You know, then we can come in with this more full specification and actually show those things on the reports. I just want to make sure that that's going to satisfy people's requirements. If we do that, you still see a 0 for some reason on your media resource. Is it enough for you to see some information to say this might be in property? Maybe I'll ask Michael or
maybe
Joseph.
not there until we support expand searches. Temporarily missing.
hold on a second.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this quite at length, you know, on the email chain or whatever, and it's fine. That would be better than nothing. Like, but I mean, we all know people don't read, and it gets very, you know, I just even get the asterisk, flash it up in some bright lights, and you know, I don't think it's a great solution. It's again better than nothing, but you know, especially when it comes to media, that it's just. I respect that there's been controversy, but there's really no controversy today. And I would think you could crank out those testing things on that piece at least. I think that's a big one. I mean, it's what people are looking for primarily. And so sure, a disclaimer is good, but it's just barely better than what exists today. And I would much rather have, you know, actual action on this. So, you know, it really it's hard to say that well we should have done it earlier because that feels bad, but that's just a fact.
It is.
Expand
absolutely.
should have been done, you know,
Yeah.
earlier, and so now we're in this kind of trap, and that's where I think the prioritization is the solution to that. In the meantime, I mean, if you're gonna really take like to the fall to get this stuff done,
No.
then,
Sorry. This
yeah,
is
we
work.
need something before that.
This is
This
work
is
in.
by fall 2022.
Yeah.
So this will be included in our next batch of presentations. As to when we can do that, we could start on it next week if you know if that's the feeling in the room that we really want to start focusing on this. And there may even be ways for us to just test the expand part first. We have other things up here too, and give credit for that. So you know, here's the important thing: is that we got the feedback from the groups at this point, and we know this is a huge priority for us.
We have Sam over here.
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little information for those of you who haven't been in this conversation for months with this as well. These are big things we've got to work on. We know we've got to prioritize them. In terms of the reports, we've made adjustments to organizations that didn't want to show availability reports because of these next steps we need to make. So just know that those reports, while are imperfect, the first stage of this platform, we know it's imperfect, and yet we've made customizations to the way we do that in showing availability and some other reports to make sure we can present as well as possible. But this is great feedback. We need to keep making improvements to the platform.
Just on that a little bit, I'm going to say that the tools are actually showing what the current spec is. They're not doing anything incorrect. They're just reflecting what we passed for Web API Core. And at that time, the group discussed expand at length over a few meetings, and they voted to keep it out. They should have voted to keep it in, maybe. You know, it sounds like that from the room. The tools can only do what the standard does. So with the metrics that we're collecting, with all this testing we're doing, we need to be a little bit more careful in the future about selecting what goes into the standard. And we need more engagement. We need more participation in reviewing those specifications so that we know what to do ahead of time rather than having to take corrective actions later.
All right, we're going to move on then. Payloads 2.0. Josh, do you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, so this is really the complement to that expand part. Once we have the ability to query by expand, which is what's given by the 2.1.0, then we can sample with expand. We can't sample without the query. So this can move quickly. This is really the next work group meeting. We can vote on this. The specifications for these have already been started. They exist on GitHub. There's a link there. We should start that review process now since this is moving quickly. Please, once you get these slides, go to the link. If you find any problems at all or want something clarified or changed, make a comment on the issue. That's how it's going to make an impact.
All right, we'll move on. URN subgroup. I think we mentioned this earlier today, didn't we? URN subgroup? I think it was mentioned at some point. Unique identifiers have been a big topic over the past several months. And we think we need to have a subgroup to explore this. Josh mentioned, I think it was on the UPI meeting, that this is possibly an actual use for a distributed ledger, blockchain, possibly, to allow a fully distributed identifier network. And we've got a volunteer to go ahead and bring that forward. Mark Leswing is very passionate about it, blockchain in particular, and the technologies around it, distributed ledger is a much better description than that because it gets tied up with other things. So he's going to take that on and bring it forward. We're going to explore that and see what's happening. That's pretty much outside of all of the other work we're going to be doing in a separate subgroup. And I believe they've got a number of people interested in participating already. So that could actually be a really exciting one. And I would recommend that you have a look.
Yeah, so what is a URN? It's basically a namespace. We had to apply for it from IANA. It took a while. And it allows us to assign universally unique identifiers for like information in the transaction. So where would you use this? Well, if you had a system that could record different parts of the transaction, like who wrote the record, where did the data come from, what changed, we can describe that in a very unique way. So that was really a key component to the event model, and you can actually find that in the RESO Confluence space. The event model relies on having very good knowledge about who participated in the transaction.
All right, let's move on. Here's the big one that people have been talking about for quite some time. I recognize that some people have other concerns, and we will address those as well, but AddEdit, or, oh man, that's weird when it does that. AddEdit or update has been something that people have talked about for a long time. There is lots of room for innovation in being able to create and update records that we're not getting to right now. And we have most of this complete. So we need to just push this forward and get it completed so that it can be moved forward as an endorsement. Anything else you'd like to add? Sergio's had a lot to do with this. Anything, Sergio? Sooner is better.
Not a heck of a lot. Sooner is better. I think we've done most of the work. We've done most of the test preparation. So I think we're ready to go, and we just have to get it passed.
And one of the things that we've been trying to do in new work that we do is to make sure that we have two implementations. A very long time ago, that was part of, that's how you got an RCP through. That's how a change proposal worked, is you had to create it, you had to get another person to create it, and then if both of those worked the way it was said, then we would bring it in and make it part of the standard. We moved away from that for a number of years, but we're trying to move back. We've got two people who've built it. We have all of the requirements to pass this and move it forward. We just have to finish up the work.
Yeah, and we've written the testing rules, so that's really an important part. We'll come back to that in a second, what role that plays. But what have we done with this? Well, we actually rewrote the existing spec that was passed. For those familiar with the parlance, it's RCP 010. And we wanted to make it more lightweight. We want to make it easier for people to get certified with this, because the use case could just be changing one field. What if you just want to update one field, even if it's not standard? Well, this supports that now. We basically have, with Web API currently, with APIs in general, there's CRUD, right? It's not very great sounding, but create, read, update, and delete. So we've got R right now in CRUD with the Web API. People can just read data, but they're missing the other three parts: creating, updating, deleting. So lightweight here, meaning that you don't have to support create, update, and delete. You could support create, update, or delete, and we're just going to expect to test one of those things. If you do more than one of those things, great. If you only do one field or do 100 fields, great. We're just going to record what you've done. And that makes it really lightweight for people so that they don't have to do a lot of work to do something like change a status or update a photo.
You know you guys are old, right? Just to be clear.
Is it not CRUD anymore?
It's not CRUD anymore.
Oh,
it's
darn.
put, post,
Well, okay.
That's
Yeah.
way too hard to say, Paul.
delete.
Well, those things actually reflect CRUD. But
Of course
just
they do.
New names.
Yeah, but the new kids. you
Yeah,
know,
it's- yeah, okay.
Let's get with
Great.
it. Let's get with the program.
I'll update my language.
Thank you. All right, let's, anything
kinda
else on
cruddy.
that? Let's move on. Well, it is supposed to be an HTTP transport. Just saying.
My language is kind of cruddy still. Sorry.
Here's some new stuff that wasn't in the agenda. We sat around last evening working on slides because we weren't done again. And we noted the fact that we've spent the past 2 years working on Zoom, mostly okay. But getting developers together, which we used to do quite frequently, and put them in a room and talk like we did at the roundtable today, I think we probably got more good feedback in 30 minutes than we have for 6 months. The proposal that I'm trying to bring forward for discussion is, what if we did a couple of these virtual ones where developers carved out a couple of hours for a couple of days, like maybe 3 days, 4 hours on those days, blocked them out, and we got on a Zoom call, hashed out some of the issues, maybe even did some code together and got some stuff done instead of getting on a plane, wasting a day, having to be here, can't address any issues that pop up during the day. Is there any appetite for this? Because I think it would be very valuable in moving some of these things forward if we just said, bunch of hours, 2 or 3 days, we're going to tackle this topic and get it done. Rick?
Yeah, so actually, I attend a lot of the work groups, and I think it's actually a very good idea because the transport meetings themselves tend to be a very packed agenda. We race through stuff, we start to have discussions, but very often we don't come to conclusions.
Right.
And so I think an idea like this is great on the premise that there is a very specific topic, you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, what your goal is. And then, yeah, I would support this, and I would happily allow my engineers to spend some time and do this type of work virtually. This is all proven, this definitely works.
Yeah.
But under those criteria, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, for
And I
RCP 10, we did this continuously over probably 2 years to get RCP 10 done, and it worked really well because it was all very focused on getting that particular specification written. It worked really well.
I think that's really the goal, is to, we have the year broken up and we have 2 conferences, right? So these would be kind of the other quarters. And that would allow us to achieve the goals that we've listed out here. So we would pick from the list that's in the basically backlog at this point, go over the priorities as a group, before we did that, and just tackle one and get it done. And so that we can put it, put it to bed by the next meeting instead of it going on for a few years.
Or fail, right? Like, I mean, failure is an option,
Yep.
and it's good to know that it isn't going to work. But if we don't try it, we'll never know. And so it would help us improve our velocity of getting things done, I believe. Let's see if we can prove it out. I have 1 vote for it. Sergio, are you in favor of it too? Yeah. Okay. Oh, more hands.
Nice.
Thank you. That much better. Okay. We haven't all fallen asleep yet. We're almost done. There's only a couple more slides. All right.
This is
Update
supposed
on.
to be 2.1.0 though.
No, this is about 2.0.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear. Several people have noted, as it says here, that GitHub version, it's a narrative around our testing rules. This is the lead into the next one.
I got it.
That's right.
Okay,
A little
thank
slow.
you.
Yeah, a little slow down.
Okay, so we've got testing rules. We have 20 vendors. The 20 vendors who've applied all passed in August. They've all completed testing. So writing tests, getting people to build against the test, and then writing the narrative is how we actually got that done. So if we continue to do that, I think it's been very successful. So it was, we write the test rules first, we write a pull request, or not a pull request, an issue first that gives the high level, here, I am a this, I want to do that, here's the outcome. And so basically a use case around the thing we want to do add edit. Bad case because it's done. But in that case, we would write, we want to do add edit, we'd write the test rules, people would start coding against the test rules because they know this is what it's going to do. We get through that clarification stage, which we've struggled with, where, hey, the specification says this, and we did that, and it's also in the specification. We'll nail those down in the test rules. We now have a complete set of test rules that have been vetted out with 1, 2, or 3. People are actually writing code against it. They're proving that it works. We now have a test suite. We can go back and write the specification, the narrative around it that explains what this does, how it does it. The people who are building this have a language all to themselves. They use that language to communicate, and test rules are actually a really good way to do that. But a new person coming in who doesn't have that language, that vocabulary, that conversation, needs the narrative to frame the test rules. Most of the people who work on these things have years of experience, decades of experience. So they can move fast, they can iterate fast because they understand test rules. They understand how to code against test, which leads to the next slide, which is sort of the bigger one that I wanted to bring up. When we were talking about this, it was pretty clear that our success with the last year and a bit has been built around this idea of writing the tests first, test-driven development, behavior-driven development. Everybody understands that. Most of us don't have the time or ability to do that on a regular basis. But in this case, we could. If someone else is providing us with the test rules, we can write our code to run the test rules. We've got a testing tool that can execute those test rules. This could be a win-win for everybody, but it would mean changing the way we do work in the work group. We're still driving the, let's write an RCP, then we'll write some test rules, and then people will try to use the RCP and then run against the test rules and fail, and we'll cycle all the way back and start again. I think we've been much more successful with writing the tests first, based on the original premise, the small little narrative, and then building a system that people can run against, and then have them be successful with that, and then write the narrative later.
Yeah, we haven't just done this with Web API. We actually also did this with Data Dictionary. We took the same approach. We wrote the tests first in both cases. The Data Dictionary specification is actually very, very light. It just explains how the Data Dictionary spreadsheet corresponds to the tests that are there. And then we just generate all those tests. So this has been a very lightweight way. It was very monolithic and slow before, as Paul mentioned. And when you write a spec up front, you don't know if that's going to work or not. You're just kind of taking a guess, right? If you write the testing rules and people actually try it, and they come back to you and say, well, this isn't quite right, we can fix that, before things like kind of sink in too much. So, and we've done that, a couple of times with what we've done so far. So it seems to be the right path.
Right. So let's go to the next slide.
We can go to the next slide too.
Which is just more verbiage around what we were just saying is, people have been successful with doing this. We have 20 vendors who've been able to build systems that get certified in fairly quick order. Once we got unstuck with, hey, build it to the spec, then you have to run against the test. And the idea is, I wanted to get a feel for the room about whether that was something that people might be open to discussing, formalizing a little bit more, moving it into being part of the standard and changing our workflow, because it does appear that it's been successful, and I think it's worth a try. So anybody have any comments, thoughts, discussions? I think there might be one more. Is there one more? There is one. And this was sort of the type of workflow that popped into my head, but this is obviously not a proposal. This is, what if we did something like this? What's the temperature of the room? Do we put some effort into changing this, which appears to have been successful? Oh, I see thumbs up. Anybody else?
Thumbs up.
Oh, more thumbs up. All right.
All right.
So we'll put some time and effort into formalizing this, bring it back to the group and say, Here's what we propose to change and to continue moving it forward in that manner.
I think we have some sample language for the test here. So
Right. This was for everybody who was like, I'm not sure I'm in the right one. This is all way too techy and just weird. These are the types of rules that are written in the simplest case. This is pretty straightforward to read. I think most of us in this room could read this and not have any question about it. Or if you do, we could answer some of them. We've also got a more complex one that goes on for many, many more pages than fit on a slide. So you can do very simple ones, you can do very complex ones, but a developer looking at this, they're going like, well, what are you trying to do? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. I think this could actually be really successful. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't leave this with, I don't understand what they're talking about. We're talking about changing it to execute against something like this, where it actually runs and you can write your code, run it against these rules, these tests, and actually see success and be able to say, oh, it failed. Oh, I didn't get that one. Okay, let's fix that.
Yeah, which really means the RCP is very light,
Yes.
and the RCP also has all the tests in it.
Yes.
the really cool thing is that like for these kind of tests, we just generate these from the dictionary. And Rob even likes the language, so that's a compliment. This is good. So, this I think has been easy for people. It's easier for us to write the tests. These ones are a little harder, but we're using a standard language, a DSL for this called Gherkin. It's very well used out there. A lot of open source tools for it. And if we hadn't even finished our test yet, for example, you could write the test of this, right? So you could write your own system test just to make sure that you had coverage. So it's pretty flexible. Also open source and available, across many platforms.
It's also another one of those cases where you could inject this into your CI/CD pipeline and be running this every time you push code, it runs a test. And
Which
it's
is
like-
actually what the commander, the testing tool
Yep.
that we use does. It uses these.
which is actually a best practice. All right. I think that's
All
it.
right.
Any questions, comments? For those of you new to this, yes, the Transport Workgroup does have some contention sometimes, and we try very hard to come to consensus, and usually we succeed. So if you do have strong feelings, why does it keep
I don't
doing
know.
that? Don't feel shy about them, because this happens all the time, and we welcome it because it means we wind up with a better solution, a better product, and it's better for the industry. All right. I don't see anyone stepping. Oh, Cody's coming forward. Okay. Uh-oh. He's got a
If you think
smile.
this was spicy, you should have seen the old Reds days. People would throw stuff at each other.
I was wondering with the new workflow, would you be looking at, so you're looking at both data dictionary and transport?
It would be
tests?
probably across anything that ran the testing tools.
So would we be looking at that with like the new enumeration values as well?
Yeah, we've generated the test for those, so we'll release that pretty quickly here.
And Cody, this is a really raw idea right now. So any feedback, input you have about how corner cases we are not even thinking of, it's just the start. And
No, I
I'd
think
love
this
you to help.
will
with
take
it.
a lot of pressure off of a lot of organizations, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm all in favor to work
All
with you
right.
on that.
All right. Sounds good.
For those who like writing rules, which is not very pleasant sometimes, but we can't always generate them. So there are cases where we have to handwrite the rules. We welcome that kind of participation. This language is flexible; anything kind of goes, so we can always clarify it further. And it's actually multilingual. It actually supports, I think, basically all languages. So
That's computer languages.
Yeah.
We are not doing Spanish or French in the
we could
next
write
week.
the testing rules in Spanish if we wanted to.
Yes, we could. I would not be able to read them.
You get to translate them.
All right. Anything else? Then I think we're done. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you sticking it out till the end.